Live from Toronto, Canada, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio, AM 740.
And welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler. Hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. Assassination researcher Jim DiEugenio this hour to help us commemorate the upcoming anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And in just a few days, of course, it will be 56 years since the 35th president was murdered in Dallas. In the second hour, a miracle molecule, carbon-60, may just hold the key to longevity. Chris Burris is a scientist turned entrepreneur, and he'll be here to tell us about C60 and this amazing peer-reviewed study, an animal study involving rats, and what it could mean for dramatically extending our lives. That's coming up in the second hour. Owen Wolf is my technical producer. Ryan White is my live stream producer, and we are live streaming on my YouTube channel, Strange Planet, so hit that red sub button if you haven't already. We're approaching 18,000 subscribers. And if you haven't already done so, please take a moment, and it just takes a moment, register at my website, strangeplanet.ca. Do it right now. Again, it takes just a moment, strangeplanet.ca. And then once you do, you'll automatically receive my free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. The November issue just went out last week. It looked great. So don't miss out on the December issue. Register at strangeplanet.ca. And once you've registered, your name also goes into the monthly draw for Strange Planet gear, like mugs, t-shirts, hoodies. We even have socks, all available at my Strange Planet shop, strangeplanet.ca. All right, almost 56 years ago, the 35th president of the United States was murdered in Dallas in a most grisly fashion, in broad daylight, in public. And of course, the questions of what really happened that day and what might have been linger for all of us. And here to hopefully answer some of those questions is truly one of the preeminent JFK assassination researchers working out there today, James DiEugenio. He is the author of Destiny Betrayed, about the Garrison investigation of the Kennedy assassination. It was first published back in 1992 with a second greatly revised edition issued in 2012. Reclaiming Parkland, published in 2013 and reissued in expanded form in 2016, which offers a detailed critical examination of the Warren Commission's evidence and conclusions, along with the analysis of the CIA's influence in Hollywood. He is also the co-author and editor of the Assassinations Probe magazine on JFK, MLK, RFK, and Malcolm X. He, of course, co-edited Probe magazine from 1993 to 2000 and was a guest commentator on the anniversary issue of the film JFK, re-released by Warner Brothers in 2013. And he's also here to tell us about a brand new project involving the director of JFK, Oliver Stone. It's a new documentary series. Jim DiEugenio, welcome back to The Conspiracy Show. How are you, my friend?
Not too bad, David. Working a little bit too hard, but outside of that, I guess we can all complain about that,
Sure. David's actually my brother. We were close. It's Richard. Remember? That's all right. You're working too hard. You're working too hard. So first, right out of the chute, tell us about this new documentary series that is based on Destiny Betrayed.
All right. Well, the announcement was in Variety last month, okay, by the distributor, all right, and which is AGC Films, Stuart Ford's outfit, okay, and we're in the editing phase right now. We shot about 25 interviews in 5 different cities. I never did that kind of travel because we did the 5 different cities in about 10 days. Okay, I've never done anything like that before. And so some very, very interesting interviews we did. All right, and we're editing together at this stage. Oliver has one editor down here in LA, one up in Seattle. Okay, and we're working away. I mean, every day I'm almost every day I'm down at his office, and he and I are looking at these interviews and figuring out how the best way to incorporate them into the script. I think we should be done. We should have a rough cut in January, and then have the final product probably in March.
And how many parts? How many parts in the series?
And market it.
How many parts in the series?
Well, that's a good question. It was originally planned as 3, but I think we have so much good stuff. I think we might go to 4. Okay, because I think I really don't want to cut out any of the great stuff we have, and believe me, we got a lot of great stuff. But that most of the American people have never been. Okay, I guess I should talk a little bit about what this is about. Okay, this documentary is about the main subject is the revelations of the Assassinations Record Review Board. And I've talked about this on your show.
Yes.
Okay. How there has been a kind of blackout about all the great discoveries, that the review board made on a wide variety of fronts. And the MSM has pretty much ignored this stuff. I would say it's been a virtual blackout. All right. And so what this film is going to try and do is try and get across to the American public. These are some very, very important discoveries, and you should be made aware of them. And the other part, the bookend part of the documentary is going to be what we've learned about JFK. Okay. In the meantime also, because there's been a lot of information on that has also been kind of ignored. Well, not kind of, it has been ignored.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I've come to the conclusion that the cover-up about who JFK was is even deeper and more complex than how he was killed.
That's an excellent point, because I wanted to follow up on that, actually, if I could just jump in here a moment. And that is the idea that the lone gunman, we have spent, not me, but you have spent and others have spent, decades, going down this path and talking about ballistics and trajectory and, was Oswald the lone gunman? Was there another shooter? Was he a patsy? Did he have anything to do with it? Was he by the vending machine? Was he not by the vending machine? I'm wondering if that in some sense might have been a setup to distract us from what you're about to talk to, which is the second cover-up.
Something that's a very good observation. Okay. And I've actually come to believe there's some truth to that. That all this arguing back and forth about, the single bullet theory, the hole in the back of JFK's head, did Oswald shoot Tippit? That, and I think they actually said this in the movie, that's all scenery. Okay. For, why was Kennedy killed? Who was he? Okay. Mm-hmm. And why was there this huge cover up? Okay. And why, and this is the really important part of the story, why did so many things change so fast after his assassination? I mean, was that all just a coincidence? I can go through a whole list of areas where this happened.
We will. I want to do that, but just let me just follow up on that idea that the second cover-up that you speak to, and we will get into foreign policy in places like the Congo and Algeria and the Middle East and so forth. But just this idea that the lone gunman debate, whether it was supposed to be shattered, because that just leads us down this other rabbit hole, which again is a distraction.
Mm.
Do you think there's any evidence?
Then you get into all these different theories. Okay, like, did the mafia kill JFK? Did the CIA kill JFK? Did Israel kill JFK? Did the Pentagon kill JFK? Did the FBI, et cetera, all the way down? Did Johnson kill JFK? And so that's what I think it was. I think you're right about that. I think that's what it was designed to do. That's how intricate that the cover-up was. And all of this is meant to distract from who was Kennedy. Why were they so desperate to get rid of him? Okay, and what happened after his assassination? So I think you're, and that's essentially what we're trying to do with this program. Okay, we're trying to put the new information out there about both his assassination and his legacy. All right, and then let the viewers. Actually, the best thing that could happen as a result of this show, I believe, is people would start saying to each other, "Why didn't Chris Matthews tell me this?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't Rachel Maddow tell me this?"
Right.
That's what I want them to ask themselves. Why do I have to get this from this documentary?
Right. Well, it reminds me of John Barber, who was on the show recently, and he interviewed Garrison, and he had a documentary out called "The Second Assassination of JFK." In other words, he was shot once in Dallas, and then the mainstream media assassinated him again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But getting onto the foreign policy, you have made the point that, again, we focus everything when we talk about Kennedy and the foreign policy, we focus on two places. We focus on Cuba and we focus on Vietnam. And people, again, they look for theories. Okay, well, he didn't support the CIA and the Bay of Pigs invasion, so that's a motive. And then he wasn't going to commit troops on the ground in Vietnam, so that's another motive. So it's all wrapped up in Cuba and Vietnam.
And I think that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's wrong. And one of the things I tried to do in the second edition of Destiny Betrayed was to explain why I thought it was wrong. All right. And I started really looking into this in about 2012. And I just became kind of frustrated because if you pick up 100 JFK books, and you read them all, that's all you're going to hear about.
Cuba and Vietnam. Cuba. Yeah.
Right. And you'll never hear about anything else. It's almost like, Kennedy spent, 900 and some days in office, and that's all he did. 500 days on Vietnam, 400 days on Cuba. And that's not the truth at all. Not at all. It's not even close to being the truth. And so one of the people we interviewed for the show is a guy who alerted me that this was wrong. His name is Richard Mahoney, and he wrote a book back in 1983, JFK Ordeal in Africa. And I didn't discover this book until about 1995, and it was completely by accident. I was in this little town near San Diego called Julian, and as I usually do when I'm on a vacation, I go into the used bookstore to see if there's anything there that I don't have. And so I went in there, and I saw this guy's book with the famous picture of JFK getting the news of Lumumba's death, which is a remarkable, dramatic, iconic photograph.
Right. His head he's despondent. His head is buried in his hands. And for those not familiar with Patrice Lumumba, he was the first sort of post-colonial president of the Congo after they won their independence from Belgium.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so once I saw that picture, it's Kennedy has this look of utter disdain, like he's almost grimacing in pain with his head in his hands. I said to myself, you know something? I don't think Eisenhower would have reacted like that. I don't think Johnson would have reacted like that. I know Nixon wouldn't have reacted like that. Nixon would have had a big smile on his face, So I said, there's got to be something more to what this guy is thinking than Vietnam and Cuba. So I picked up the book. And that book really opened up my eyes to what Kennedy's ideas about foreign policy were. All right. And I'll never forget reading it. Okay. I was just, kind of like, I'm not sure if my eyebrows arched up in the air. Okay. But that's the kind of feeling that I remember I was reading it. I didn't know any of this stuff, So I incorporated a lot of that into the second edition of Destiny Betrayed. All right. And I tried to show that this policy that Kennedy had, this before he entered the White House, it wasn't really something that happened after the Bay of Pigs or after the missile crisis. But it helps us understand why Kennedy did not send in the Navy at the Bay of Pigs, why he did not bomb the missile silos during the missile crisis, why he refused to send in ground troops into Vietnam in 1961, and then drew the line, and it was simply, by 1963, he's looking to get out. And so it was this idea, this concept he had about the third world that helped me understand why those things never happened with him. All right. And so I went into this, and I actually brought up the name of a guy that not very many people even knew about, which I thought was disgraceful. Okay. His name was Edmund Gullion. All right. Edmund Gullion was a longtime State Department official who Kennedy briefly met in Washington in, I think, 1947 or 1948. And when he took a trip to Saigon and Asia, the rest of Asia, in 1951, he remembered Gullion, and because Gullion spoke fluent French, and he was now stationed in Saigon. So when Kennedy went there, he looked up Gullion, and like many other people that he did this with, he asked him. This was at a rooftop restaurant in Saigon. Bobby Kennedy was there. And he asked him, are we on the right side here? Is France going to win the war? Because I think all your listeners will know, the French Civil War against Vietnam was going on at this time.
They were trying to win back the colony. Yeah.
Right, after World War II. Okay, and the United States was supporting this effort. And in fact, by 1950, the United States was footing about 75 to 80% of the bill for this colonial war. So Kennedy asked him, is France going to win this war? And Gullion shot back and he said, there's no way in the world France is going to win this war. All right? Ho Chi Minh has fired up these Viet Minh rebels to the point that they would rather die than go back under the yoke of colonialism. France will never win a war of attrition, because that's what's happening here. It's a war of attrition. Neither side can win. And therefore, they will lose home support for this effort. And then he added, very presciently, he said, and if the United States tries to come in and do the same thing, we will lose also. Okay, well, JFK was really taken aback by this, all right? And his brother said that this conversation had a very deep and transformative impact on his thinking, okay? And so what happened was that when he got back, he began to make these radio addresses attacking the State Department, that we have too many people who were toadying up to the home colonial powers instead of being in tune.
I got to jump in here.
Aspirations of the people there.
We're going to take a break here, but we'll come back. We'll pick up on Edmund Gullion, is Kennedy's mentor in some ways, and we'll begin to understand that Kennedy's foreign policy was pretty much in place by the time he was inaugurated in 1961. He didn't do an about-face because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was who he was coming into office, and perhaps this more than anything has to do with his assassination. Jim DiEugenio stays with us right here on The Conspiracy Show. Don't go away.
The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Jim DiEugenio, one of the world's preeminent assassination researchers, the author of Destiny Betrayed, Reclaiming Parkland, The Assassinations, Probe magazine on JFK, MLK, RFK, and Malcolm X, and now working very closely with Oliver Stone on a documentary series based on Destiny Betrayed. And before the end of the hour, maybe we'll get some more details on when we might expect that and where we might see it. It could be a 3-part or it could be a 4-part series. Jim, we were talking about Edmund Gullion, the State Department official that really helped, I guess, open Kennedy's eyes when he was still a senator in the late 40s and then into the 1950s. So the idea here is that when Kennedy was inaugurated in January of 61, this was his foreign policy was pretty much cemented, right?
I think you can make that statement that when he goes ahead and enters the White House in 1961, generally speaking, his foreign policy views have already been forged, and I believe you can look at places like Congo and Vietnam that will prove that point, as well
Indonesia.
As Indonesia.
Right. Now, was Gullion in the White House with him? Was he an advisor?
Well, Gullion actually becomes, I think by the summer of 1961, he becomes the ambassador to Congo.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I have to say something about this, which I didn't know until recently. Anybody who reads my website, kennedysandking.com, or reads my books or listens to me on any of the shows I'm on, will understand that I believe that the relationship between Kennedy and Dag Hammarskjöld has been very underrated, okay, and ignored, relatively ignored, all right? There's this film that came out, Cold Case Hammarskjöld.
Yes, I just had that guy on my show a while ago.
Oh, you did?
Yes. Actually, he was on my podcast.
Didn't know that. Did you see the film?
I did. It's an excellent film. I had him on my podcast. It's wonderful. And for those, just a quick backstory, Dag Hammarskjöld, Secretary General of the United Nations, was, they didn't know what they were getting. They thought he was some dry bureaucrat, but he was a very aggressive, proactive individual. And he sent peacekeeping forces into the Congo really on his own. I mean, he just went over everybody's head. And at that time, the Congo was fighting a war with a breakaway portion of the Congo called Katanga, where all the mineral wealth is really in Katanga. So Congo could not let Katanga go. And he was trying to broker a peace deal between Katanga and Congo when his plane, of course, mysteriously crashed in what is now Zimbabwe, I think. And in this film, Cold Case, it's pretty much case closed, I think, in terms of what happened. His plane was shot down. It was not a pilot error. It was his plane was shot down. He was murdered.
And by the way, they're still covering up about this. They still can't get, the UN still can't get certain files from South Africa, the United States, Belgium, and Great Britain.
Right.
Okay? All the guilty parties. Okay?
Right. So the connection between Kennedy and Hammarskjöld and the murder of Patrice, the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the president in Congo. What is the connection there?
See, this is, I'm really frustrated that more people in this field do not understand how important Congo was, you know. I mean, in so many different ways. And I talked about this time after time after time, until finally I got blue in the face and I kind of gave up. All right. But Congo, just understand this. In 3 years, the 3 people who tried to stand up for Congo's independence against European imperialism were all assassinated under strange circumstances. Lumumba, Hammarskjöld, and Kennedy. And by the way, I am not going to ever say again that Hammarskjöld was killed in a plane accident, because I think that's a complete BS story. Okay, and I think anybody who sees that film will understand why. All right? Now, this is such an important story for the simple reason that Congo was the first sub-Saharan, African state to try and make a go out of independence after decades upon decades of European colonialism. And Lumumba was such a charismatic figure, and he was a symbol of freedom and nationalism, to millions of Africans, all right? And let's be clear about this. The CIA, working in tandem with the Belgians and the leaders in Katanga, essentially kidnapped him and assassinated him by firing squad. All right. And then they went ahead and buried him, and then they resurfaced his body and threw acid on it so there wouldn't be any remains left of the body. And I think they did that twice. That's how much they feared that he would become, well, and it backfired anyway because he is a symbol, But when this is what Kennedy's picture was taken of by Jacques Lowe that I've tried to describe. Well, Hammarskjöld tried to step in and keep Congo united and also independent. All right. He sent in, it's really remarkable, he sent in something like 20,000 troops into Congo to clear out Katanga, and of all the mercenaries from Belgium, from France, from England, etc. All right. And so they could be unified under one leader chosen by the people. All right. Now, if you see that film, you will understand how certain people, most likely the Belgians and the Union of South Africa people, decided that Hammarskjöld had to be done away with. And there's 2 very important things to understand about this. First of all, in the Union of South Africa, when they had the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, they found documents from a shadowy entity called Samir, which was a paramilitary group. There were about 12 documents found. They did dirty work for the imperial powers throughout Africa. All right. One of the documents is a summary of a communication with Alan Dulles. And it says, Alan wants Dag taken care of more cleanly than Patrice was. Let me say that again, because I want everybody to get the import of this. Alan wants Dag taken care of more cleanly than Patrice was. What else could that possibly mean?
Right.
You know? All right. Now, the other thing that's so important that came out of late was that Edmund Gullion, who was the ambassador there, he never bought the accident story. I'm not kidding. From the day that it happened, he thought that Hammarskjöld's plane was shot down. And he thought that it was shot down by a Belgian pilot, a mercenary pilot. Okay? Now, we're going to go further with this story in the documentary we're producing, because we found out some even more interesting information about Gullion and the Congo and Dag Hammarskjöld.
But I think that the takeaway
so
here...
In other words, Hammarskjöld is now dead.
Right.
So Kennedy, one of the most amazing stories and the most hidden stories in the Kennedy presidency is that Kennedy took up Hammarskjöld's cause. He decided he was going to finish the job that Hammarskjöld had started. All right, he goes to the UN and he says, let us not let Dag Hammarskjöld have died in vain. And he goes ahead and he says, we have to keep those UN troops there. We have to get rid of this mercenary government in Katanga. Congo has to be one country under one elected leader. And he sticks to this. He sticks to this until the day he was assassinated. All right? And at great political expense. And so then what happens is that he agrees to let the UN troops go. He wanted to get a negotiated settlement. He couldn't get it. He agrees to let the UN troops go into Katanga. All right? And they take out Mosi Tashambi, who was the front guy for the European interests. Okay? And for a while, it looked like Congo was going to be the first independent, free state, sub-Saharan Africa, a great example to the rest of Africa. Well, like many other things, once Johnson came in, that went topsy-turvy, all right, in a lot of different ways. And so what happens is that Congo ends up being a vassal state again, under Joseph Mobutu, who ruled for 30 years, sacked the country of hundreds of millions of dollars, left the country a poor state with a lot of European interests still making money off it. And see, this is one of the stories that until I came around, I'm not touting my own horn because I'm not the only guy who could have done it. A lot of people could have done it and should have done it.
Jim,
okay?
I got to jump in here.
I came around and started talking about this.
I got to jump in here. We got to take a time out. We'll come back and we'll talk about some other places around the world. We're starting to see a pattern here, folks. Jim DiEugenio back with more on the JFK assassination. Stay with us.
Where the truth often hides. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Just a reminder, coming up in the second hour, Chris Burrows will be here to talk about this miracle molecule, carbon-60. And right now, Jim DiEugenio stays with us. We're commemorating the 56th anniversary of the murder of President John F. Kennedy. And we're seeing this pattern emerge. And first in the Congo. Oh, just let me one more point on Patrice Lumumba. So he's assassinated just within, a week of Kennedy's inauguration in January of 61. And then, of course, there's that iconic photograph.
Richard, you're wrong.
Oh.
He was assassinated before Kennedy took office.
Oh.
All right. 3 days before he was inaugurated.
3 days before. Okay,
and
3 days
many
before.
people, including myself, believe that the CIA sped it up because they knew that JFK would not stand for this. Okay? So they got rid of him before Kennedy was inaugurated. And then he doesn't find out until 3 weeks after he becomes president.
Okay, so it's after he finds out. I understand. So it was Eisenhower who likely signed off on that.
Yeah, well, he did. He did. The Church Committee came to that conclusion. That what happened was that Eisenhower essentially said, we've got to get rid of this guy. All right. And then the job went to Allen Dulles, and Allen Dulles sent a cable to Leopoldville and said, and remember, this is 1960, right? He says, you have a $100,000 budget. Do with it as you will, but get rid of Lumumba. Now, $100,000 back then would be like $900,000, close to $1 million today.
Right.
Okay. You can dream up a lot of ways to kill somebody with that kind of money. Okay. So that's what the station chief, a guy named Devlin, did in Leopoldville. And they brought in, oh my God, QJ Wynn, W.I. Rogue, Sidney Gottlieb, the poisoner, the guy who designed all these poisons. All right. And then they finally decided, you know something? There's a better way to do this so our hands aren't directly involved. Okay. Let's go ahead and wait for Lumumba to escape house arrest. And then let's get him once he escapes and deliver him to his enemies in Katanga. So that's what they did.
Right.
That's what they did. Helicopters, computer sensors. When he escaped from house arrest, they tracked him down. Okay. They cordoned off all the waterways. Okay. So he couldn't cross. And they captured him, turned him over to the people that hated his guts, and then they arranged a firing squad over in Katanga.
Okay.
There's actually a pretty good movie about this. Did you see it? Lumumba?
No, I haven't.
I would recommend seeing that. That's actually a pretty good film.
Okay, this is a short segment, so I want to move on to Indonesia if I can, because what I want you to establish is this pattern that Kennedy is undoing or trying to undo all of these little operations that the Dulles brothers and the Rockefellers, we should point out, were putting in place. So that brings us to Indonesia and one of the world's most bloodiest coups in history that cost anywhere between 250,000 and 500,000 lives. So what was going on in Indonesia and the Dulles brothers? Well,
the Dulles brothers tried to overthrow Sukarno, who was the original president of the country. And it didn't work very well. So the American military aid to the armed forces there was increased. And then Kennedy comes in. And Kennedy looks at the reports about the attempted overthrow, and he says, no wonder Sukarno doesn't like it. We tried to overthrow his government. All right. And so he decides that he wants to get one of the CIA pilots who was caught during the attempted coup, Alan Pope, back. All right. So he decides he has to meet with Sukarno one way or the other. And so he says he wants to arrange a deal. Okay. We want to get Alan Pope back, and then we'll work with you to get West Irian or Papua returned to you from the Dutch, because Sukarno thought that this was really part of Indonesia. All right. And so JFK sets up what's called the New York Agreement. His brother and Ellsworth Bunker negotiate for Sukarno to get that island back under Indonesian rule. All right. And so things are really looking great between Sukarno and JFK. And Sukarno's really happy, and Kennedy has promised he's going to visit Indonesia in 1964, all right? And Sukarno starts building an estate for his visit, okay? And he was really relying on Kennedy's visit there to prop up his presidency, okay, against his enemies in the military and also the British, okay, who are trying to form this Malaysian entity, okay, which he sees as being against him. And so when Kennedy's assassinated, Sukarno starts crying. He says, why did they, notice he said they, why did they kill my friend John Kennedy? Mm-hmm. All right? And believe me, that wasn't even the beginning of the dark day that it seemed to Sukarno, because, man, as fast as the policy changed in Congo, it might have been even faster in Indonesia. Okay, in about a space of about 4 months, Johnson decides he's not going to visit Indonesia. All right, he's going to cut off all economic funds to Indonesia and funnel them to the military, where he knew many of Sukarno's enemies were. In the summer of 1964, the CIA begins to plan covert propaganda and bring in people they think they can rely on to overthrow Sukarno.
Okay, I got to jump in here. I got to jump in, Jim. Well, we'll pick this up on the other side, the Indonesian coup. Again, 250,000 to 500,000 people in this bloody coup. And it's all about the gold, folks. Back with more of Jim DiEugenio right here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
740.
I think we're starting to see the pattern here. And it involves the Dulles brothers, for sure, and the Rockefellers, David Rockefeller, as we'll discover as well. And it's not just about Kennedy's foreign policy with regards to Cuba or Vietnam. It's all over the place. It's the Congo. It's Indonesia, as we're now discussing. In a moment, we'll talk about Iran and Egypt, if time permits. But let's just finish up with Indonesia. So this bloody coup to overthrow Sukarno. And the CIA, they're funneling in money and propaganda and so forth. Just continue on, Jim, and then we'll move on to Iran.
Right. And so the guy they decide to back is this General Suharto. And Suharto is sort of like a double agent. Or he's making like he's part of the team that wants to protect Sukarno, but he's really a guy who is working on the other side. And so he pretty much takes over the night of the coup, okay? And through instructions through the army, they went ahead and decimated the PKI, which was the Indonesian Communist Party, which I'm pretty sure was the largest communist party in any country outside of Russia and China, all right? And nobody really knows, like you said, 1 million, 500,000. Some people put it even higher. Okay.
Well, the rivers were running red. The rivers were running red.
Yes, yes. And so when it's all over, the same thing happened in Indonesia that happened in Congo. Suharto becomes more or less a military dictator like Joseph Mobutu, and he sacks the country, except one big difference. Indonesia was even richer than Congo because, like you talked about, these two gold strikes called the Erzberg and the Grasberg in these mountains on West Irion, which very few people knew about, but Alan Dulles did, that they were the most phenomenal sources of gold in the entire world at that time. And so what happens, of course, is that a Rockefeller company called Freeport Sulphur comes in, buys the claim from Suharto, and to say they took out hundreds of millions actually is a lowball. It's probably in the tens of billions.
Right.
Okay, from both places. Later became Freeport McMoran, all right? And the wealth was just mind-boggling. Gold, silver, copper. There was even oil in West Irian, all right? There's a good book coming out in the fall about this called Alan Dulles versus John F. Kennedy, Target Indonesia, all right? Well, I know because I wrote the afterword for it. All right, now, I think the place
I wanted to mention Iran.
Go to next.
Can we talk about Iran? Okay. Because we know that in the 1950s, the CIA...
And nobody talks about the Middle East.
Oh, do you want to? Well, do you want to go there? Well,
yeah. Why don't we go to his Middle East policy?
Okay, Nasser. JFK was a big supporter of Abdel Nasser.
Right. Just what I was going to say. Kennedy looked at Nasser of Egypt as a way of neutralizing the radical Islamists in that area. He didn't like people like the Shah in Iran or King Saud in Saudi Arabia. He thought they were backward. He thought they were dictatorial. He thought they lacked in human rights. And so he put a lot of pressure on the Shah to begin to at least democratizing his state and granting serfs property and human rights, etc. And so what happens is that he begins to back Nasser because Nasser, number one, is a progressive, Egypt is a democracy, and he's secular. Okay? Nasser opposed the Muslim Brotherhood. He declared war on the Muslim Brotherhood inside of Egypt. Okay, and so Kennedy looked at him to moderate, okay, the Arabs. And there's two other things that are very important. Number one, Kennedy was trying to press Golda Meir and David Ben-Gurion in Israel as a right to return for Palestinians. What that meant was that he thought the Palestinians who were thrown out during the war of 47 and 48, and I think what they call it the Nabaka, is it called the Nabaka? Nbaka?
I'm not sure of the pronunciation.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so he said, look, we should give these people three options. They can stay where they are, they can return to their homes in Israel, or they can be resettled somewhere else. The UN will pay for it, which really meant the United States would pay for it. And he was pushing this all the way into 1963 after the UN had given up on it. Okay? Try and find an American politician who's for that today. All right? And then the second thing he was demanding of Israel was Dimona inspections.
Right. Of their nuclear missiles.
The atomic reactor at Dimona was for a nuclear weapon. I'm sure you know all about that, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. But the other thing, though, was Kennedy was, here's just a quick point on U.S.-Israel relations. Kennedy was really the first president that said to Israel, we have your back, because he sold them anti-aircraft guns, and he was, in many regards, they planted the JFK Memorial Forest in Israel. He was Israel's best friend. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, he sold them jets, but he checked this out with Nasser to begin with. He let Nasser know what he was doing and why he was doing it, okay? Because he was trying to find a middle, okay, that he could negotiate, bring some people to the negotiating table, by not completely alienating Israel. But I will say this. Kennedy wrote two threatening letters to David Ben-Gurion in which he literally said, either you're going to let us into Dimona or you're going to have trouble getting money out of us. All right? And this first letter, Ben-Gurion went nuts, started accusing, Nasser of being a new Hitler. Okay, Kennedy just ignored it, wrote him another letter. The second one, he was a little bit more moderate in his reply, but he did not give them a timetable. The next day, and I'm telling you, this is absolutely the truth, David Ben-Gurion stepped down as Prime Minister of Israel. Okay? And I wrote a long article in this magazine called Garrison about this because I don't think that many people knew about it. All right, but I think it's extraordinarily interesting because our Middle East policy after Kennedy's assassination, just like everything else, it went completely bonkers. It went completely downhill.
We're just about out of time here, Jim, but the important thing here for me is 60 years ago almost, Kennedy saw the danger of radical Islam and was trying to prevent that from happening. And now all his worst nightmare came true, didn't it?
Right, exactly correct.
All right, Jim, we are out of time, but very quickly, when can we hope to see this new exciting documentary project you're working alongside with Oliver Stone?
Well, I suspect it'll be done in March, go on the market next summer. So you'll probably see it next fall.
Fantastic. And we can follow all the latest updates at the website kennedysandking.com. Yeah. And I've linked up to that site on strangeplanet.ca. Just click on Jim's name. It'll take you right there, kennedysandking.com. Jim, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks, Reg.
Jim DiEugenio. What a busy guy. All right, when we come back, the miracle molecule carbon-60. Stay with us.